racks and racks and racks of paintings along the wall that are very well kept, and double racks. I said, what are all these? And he said, Peter said, these are my father Leo's paintings. I said, oh, can I see? And I started to look through them, and I was like, oh my God, this stuff is magnificent. My name is Gene Fedorko, and I lived in Provincetown in the 70s. Leo was such an amazing man in the sense that he lived, drank, slept, ate, traveled as an artist. Art was on his mind all the time. I'm standing here among his work, which are so beautifully hung, and I am in that kind of a trance, that magic trance. It's shamanistic, and I feel that kind of magic, that cosmic energy, pardon the cliche, but I'm serious. And I hope that people that come through the show and see the show and collect are imbued with at least a little bit of that magic. And thank you.
We're so happy to see you here for our last Fredi, Schiff, Levin lecture series of 2021. Maybe we'll be able to have them again in person in 2022, which would be so great. But we are really looking forward to hearing from Mary tonight. And I know it's going to be fabulous. I can't wait. Mary, you just devoted your whole career to Provincetown art and artists and art history, right? This is pretty impressive.
Well, I also other things, but a lot, yes.
A lot, yes. Yeah, it is pretty incredible. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome everyone to the Fredi, Schiff, Levin lecture series, which is now in its 18th year and graciously sponsored by the Levin family. We are honoring Fredi's legacy as a member of the Provincetown arts community by inviting artists, curators, and scholars to speak at PAAM. We extend our deepest gratitude to the Levin family and to Amy Davies and Provincetown Television for filming this series. Thank you for joining us online. Tonight, we welcome Mary Abell to discuss the Leo Manso exhibition at PAAM, which you can view in person through October 17th. Mary earned her Ph.D. in art history at the Graduate Center, City University of New York, focusing on American art. She has written extensively on Edwin Dickinson's work and was the curator of the comprehensive 2007 exhibition at PAAM, Edwin Dickinson in Provincetown, 1912 to 1937, which won an award from the International Art Critics Association New England chapter for Best Historical Monographic Museum Show in New England 2007. Mary curated Long Point and Artist's Place, 1977 to 1998 for PAAM in 2012. She was the chair of the Department of Visual Arts, Graphic Design, and Digital Arts at Dowling College in Oakdale, New York for 10 years. From 1987 to 1994, Mary was director of the Long Point Gallery in Provincetown. She is married to the artist Carmen Cicero and lives in New York City and Truro. Please join me in welcoming Mary. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Leslie. Let me see. I just want to make sure I've got everything straight here. Before I begin this lecture, I wanted to thank some of the people who made the Leo Manso exhibition at PAAM possible. And first is the curator, Eugene Fedorko, who approached PAAM after seeing these amazing pieces of Leo's art in his son Peter's basement in Truro. And he felt the passionate urge to bring them to people's, for people to see them because they'd been in storage for like 30 years. I also want to thank Chris McCarthy, who is always a pleasure to work with and was very enthusiastic about a show of Leo Manso's, which is devoted to his collages, paintings, and prints primarily, although there are some assemblages in the exhibition too. I also want to thank members of her staff, including James Zimmerman, who was so helpful with the photographs that he supplied, and Seth Abramson, the registrar, who also helped us, along with Jim, to hang the show. And special thanks to Leslie Marchesalt, who's development director of PAAM, and also to Amy Davies, the executive director for Provincetown Community Television, whom you've just heard Leslie lauding, who were very reassuring and professional in the preparation of this lecture. In closing my introduction, I wanted to say I was delighted when Jean approached me about writing an essay on Leo's work. Then, during the preparation for the show, Peter Manso passed, and it was unexpected that everybody went into shock. However, Peter's wife, Anna, stepped up to the plate and completed working on the show with Eugene and the staff of the museum, and so it could continue as planned. So, from a personal point of view, I met Leo in 1976 through my future husband, Carmen Cicero, whom Leo had asked to become a member of the newly created Long Point Gallery that he was spearheading in that year of 1976. I grew to have great affection for Leo as a person and a sincere admiration for his art. His deeply held belief in the significance of art and the importance of nurturing the creative well springs of burgeoning artists were very inspiring. During the research I contacted the Archives of American Art that has some wonderful photographs, written materials, and 2 terrific interviews conducted with Leo, Dorothy Gies-Seckler in 1965, and here in Provincetown, and with his dealer at that point in New York, Colette Roberts, in 1970. I'm happy that I've been able to borrow those from the archives, and I'll be able to have some excerpts that you can listen to that will be sporadically placed through the lecture. So you'll be able to hear Leo speaking directly about his art and where his influences were, and he'll speak a little bit about what he considered his role as a teacher as well. And then in 1991, Christopher Busa, who was the founder and editorial director of Provincetown Arts, many of you know him, know that he passed last year. He commissioned a video to be shot in 1991 of an opening at Long Point Gallery. Well, actually, it was the publication party to celebrate Provincetown Arts that year when Long Point was featured on the cover. So to look into Leo's bio now, you can see on the screen that he was born in 1914 and he passed in 1993. And you're looking at a portrait of Leo by Joel Meyerowitz that was shot in 1990 as part of the Provincetown Arts article. Leo was a significant artist and educator in both New York and Provincetown art circles, as you will see, and helped to foster Provincetown's reputation as a major art colony. He was the primary force in organizing 2 cooperative galleries in Provincetown, the 256 Gallery from 1951 to 1957, and the Long Point Gallery from 1976 to 1998. Leo and the painter Victor Candel established the Provincetown Workshop in 1958 that ran until 1976. And this became, which you will hear, what the art historian Dorothy Gies-Seckler described in her interview as, quote, easily recognized as the most important school at this time in Provincetown. For many years, Leo served on the board of PAAM, and he was always an advocate for the work of younger artists. He participated in the summer program Forum 49 at PAAM, along with Fritz Bultmann, Adolf Gottlieb, Hans Hofmann, Judith Rothschild, and other artists. Tony Vevers, a co-founder with Manso of the Long Point and its president for many years, once stated that Leo, quote, was a vital member of the art world for some 40 years as a teacher, founder of 2 important galleries, and primarily as an artist who upheld the highest standards, end of quote. Robert Motherwell, another member of Long Point, who also knew Leo for many years, considered him, quote, one of the collage masters of the past decade. Leo was also very involved with education in New York City, and he exhibited in abstract with a lot of exhibitions there. He was a member of the Abstract Artists, well, that's what they were called, the American Abstract Artists. Anyway, it was an organization with a lot of shows. His favorite media included painting, collage, assemblage, and prints. Okay, he first came to Provincetown in 1947 with his wife Blanche and their two sons, Peter and Victor, and established a home and a studio for his family in the town. He was very stimulated by the artistic milieu in Provincetown at this time, and he made it his summer home. At the time, he earned his living as a book designer and illustrator, taking the position of art director at World Publishing in New York, and in 1943 worked for Simon & Schuster, illustrating book covers. And these are examples of some of the book covers that he did. As you can see, some of them were surrealistic, with symbolic objects such as daggers, open books, hands, and the content and matched the protocol of the Book Jacket Designers Guild perfectly. And his work is looked upon as very important in terms of the development of graphic design by collectors. And so here's some examples of those covers. Interestingly enough, in 1947, when he moved to Provincetown, he made the decision to give up of designing book covers and devote himself to becoming an art teacher. So here's what Leo looked like about 6 years after he came to Provincetown. This is a photograph by Arnold Newman. And I think it's interesting to see what he looked like at that point. So this was just after he decided to switch careers. But when he came to Provincetown, many of us know it was a very heady time in the art colony. It was right after the Second World War. It was very invigorating. The art scene had really switched from Paris into New York. The abstract expressionists the New York School were summering in Provincetown, and it was a very, very exciting time to be here. Looking at his biography a little more, he was born in the Bronx. His father was a jeweler and an artisan with his own shop. The family originated from southern Russia around Odessa. Leo was involved in art for his entire life. He was fundamentally self-taught. He learned to draw, he said, when he was around 3. He was educated in the New York City school system and studied for a short period at the National Academy of Design, the New School for Social Research. He, in several interviews, would mention the very strong visual encounter that he had when he went to the Metropolitan Museum, where he was copying paintings on the advice of one of his instructors. And he saw the Assumption of the Virgin in the View of Toledo by El Greco. And he said it was an epiphany. He said it's for the first time he realized that art could have a direct emotional impact on the viewer, like music, that it wasn't just picture making. Okay, one of the things I wanted to stress is that though Leo was born during the same period as the first generation of abstract expressionists, his abstract paintings were more influenced by Eastern philosophic ideas and art, and his travels to countries such as India and Nepal, rather than Western sources, though we'll see both traditions were apparent in his long career. For instance, I'll be devoting a section of this lecture to his works done inspired by Italy, and many of them are on display in the PAAM exhibition. as an early artist, he talked about the fact that he was inspired by social realism, because that was really what was popular in art circles in the 1930s and 40s in this country. But he was also interested in Picasso and Braque. So he was doing facades of tenement houses and bridges and according in a cubist manner. But he soon discovered that this really wasn't his forte, and that he was really more interested in a transcendental art rather than a literal one. So we see an abrupt change in his work. This is his Nightwears. That was a gift of Jean Bogosian and is in the collection of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. And you can see it comes from 1953. Leo was a city boy, as we've seen, and he was not used to being in the natural world. So he talked about, in both of his interviews, about going to Mexico in 1945 when he was 31 years old and having a revelatory experience of what he called the rhythm of nature and man's place in it, which was the interview with Colette Roberts from 1970. And he talked about how he began to see light not only as what he called a manifested living thing, but also, as he said, a spiritual entity. And when he came to Provincetown, this idea was reinforced to him as well. In art history, the late paintings of Monet and Turner were influential, along with the 13th century Sung painters from China, because he felt that these artists included the viewer as a participant in their emotional response to nature. So he began to consider the possibility of a similar immersion in landscape for his artistic process. Therefore, he talks about walking in the landscape and making drawings, recording his subjective experience of the natural phenomenon, which then he transposed into the medium of painting, utilizing color, shapes, and surface. For instance, this painting Nightwears, it evokes his sensory experience and response to his observation of fishing weirs at night in the Provincetown harbor. Now, weirs were nets constructed to trap fish when fishing was a major industry in Provincetown, and they were removed by the late 60s. Leo has referred to his early landscape work as what he called abstract impressionism because of the influence of light and atmosphere. He spoke about beginning his painting practice by emptying his mind and commenced the process without any preconceived ideas. Now, this methodology reminds one of the meditative practices common in Buddhism, Hinduism, and Tantrism, religious traditions in which Leo was well read. Interestingly, I'm sure some of you are thinking this method was similar to the psychic automatist technique inherited from surrealism that was being utilized a lot by the New York School, members of the New York School. His gray sun that we're looking at here from 1959 is abstract with spatial elements in the center and utilizes delicate color harmonies, which would not be typical of the strongly expressive brushwork of the New York School, like you'd see with de Kooning or Franz Klein, for instance. Now, Fairfield Porter, a wonderful figurative artist, was also wrote for Art News magazine, and he talked in one of his articles in 1954, and he's talking about not this particular picture, but Leo's landscape paintings, and he says everything melts, moves, and shines with everything else. The sun, the night, gulls, and an approaching storm are his sensible but intangible material. And as Leo developed as an artist, he became more involved in his own nature rather than physical nature. He told Roberts, quote, "I found I didn't need the springboard of the appearance of things or the translation from the appearance of things to say what I had to say," end of quote. He also found himself becoming more absorbed in the art of the East and an aesthetic based on transcendence, made possible by meditative engagement. His desire to find transcendence in his work, with its avoidance of ego, which he admired in Eastern art, also attracted him to African sculptures, which he and his wife collected. From 1971 to 1972, Leo traveled twice to Africa, spending time in Morocco, Senegal, Mali, and Upper Volta. When he did the interview with Colette Roberts, he was 56 years old, and he recalled that during the Depression, he said one felt traumatized by the economic and political conditions of the time. However, he said he felt, quote, triple traumatized by events in 1970. He said, really, I want to stop time to say, stop the world, I want to get off. I think the world is pretty rotten. The content of my work is silence and quiet, a certain kind of peace. I think life is a paradox and that physical life is a bloody bore. I think the inner life is the real life, end of quote. Now, almost 20 years later, in an interview in 1989 with a journalist from the Provincetown Advocate, he said, we live in a world moving very fast with no fixed values. I know who I am when I have my art around me. I strive to create some kind of order in what I perceive as a chaotic world. Given Leo's predilection for creating order and peace in his art, it's not surprising that his studies of Eastern philosophy intensified and that he should yearn to visit the places that he had been reading about. Beginning in 1964, Leo developed an interest in tantric art and spent 8 years reading extensively in Buddhist, Hindu, and tantric philosophies, along with the history of India. In 1973, he traveled to India and Nepal to study tantric art at its source. He and his wife began to collect tantric art. In fact, Blanche became a dealer of these artifacts. Tantra, found in both Hinduism and Buddhism, is a quest for spiritual excellence by fostering the divine within the human body, which consists of a union of the masculine, feminine, and spirit matter, with the ultimate goal of reaching a blissful state of non-duality. A tanka is a Tibetan Buddhist painting on cotton, silk applique, often depicting a Buddhist deity, mandala, or scene. Manso's Ming tanka that we see here, it's in the collection of PAAM. There's no date. It's a collage on masonite. It has hues reminiscent of Ming Dynasty paintings. The complementary reds and greens attract one's attention, but their polarities are harmonized and energized. The open purplish expanse, which dominates the lower half of the painting, has a green horizontal band placed in the middle, which focuses the eye and calms the mind. Manso here is using the idea of a mandala to evoke a meditative response using color more than traditional tanka imagery. And we'll look at his Yantra series. A yantra, and this painting, by the way, we again have no date for this. It's also in the collection of PAAM. So a yantra is the visual yogic equivalent of the mandala in Buddhism. Its purpose is meditative, and it serves as a microcosm of the universe. Yantra symbolizes the body, while the mantra symbolizes the mind. Manso's yantra that we see here hearkens the viewer to enter a circular cosmos, which is contained and stabilized within a square format. Fiery reds and two circular blue fiery reds surround two circular blue forms, which might be viewed as portals to the peaceful void beyond. Then we take a look at his Kathmandu series, and this one is in the collection. It's called Passage 2 from 73-74. That's in the collection of the Everson Museum and was a gift of Peter and Susan Manso. He made 50 collages in his Kathmandu series, and there was an exhibition in 1973-74 held at the Everson Museum. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I got my dates wrong. The whole series was from 1973-74, but the exhibition at the Everson Museum was in 1976. They're based on his experience in the Himalayan foothills, where he immersed himself in the mysteries of the natural world, seeking to circumvent his ego and unite with more universal essences and a sense of infinity, as he told Gordon Brown, who wrote the essay for the catalog. Each of these works is small. They're only 8¼ inches in diameter and with delicate color harmonies. He felt that the microcosmic form best captured the intensity of the infinite cosmos that he experienced in the Himalayas. In this piece, there's a sense of space unfolding and continuing beyond the edges of the circular border. And what's interesting is we're going to be talking more about Leo and collage, but this is to get the hues that he wanted, the very delicate hues. He dyed his own materials, including rice paper, torn cloth, and even singed mats from ironing boards. Now here we're going to take a look. We've got an excerpt. It's about 7 minutes from his interview with Dorothy Gies-Seckler, where he's really talking about his art. So here we go.
No, I think that one must work out of myth. There's a fully believed myth that the primitive artist who lived in a collective society was able to create significant works of art because he believed what he did. And his craft served his belief, and he submerged himself in something bigger than his own personal ego. The problem of the contemporary artist is that he mainly uses his art to expand his ego and to deify his ego. And I believe quite the reverse is necessary. I think the submergence of the individual in an idea that is bigger than he creates the possibility of his growth. I think too many of us have gone through the process of, of deifying the ego rather than serving some idea that's big.
Well, for you, of course, there's this identification with the primitive artist who has his bigger element in the collective society. How do you see that possibility for realizing that on our own terms?
That's a sociological question that I'm not equipped to answer. All I know is that every man's got to find himself. Well, I believe in a kind of art where there's no loose end in a classical sense. I mean, a completely controlled art. And I believe in an art where you must submerge the surface aspects of your experience and go profoundly into something within you where you might be able to touch the collective unconscious.
Could you give an example of this? I know how difficult this is, but if there's any experience occurred to you that you could describe in connection with making one of your let's say, recent paintings, of the way you would be led deeper into the painting by your, whatever happened in the way of manipulating materials and so on. I know that's tough thing.
Yeah, it's very tough because that's the kind of question one would like to illustrate with a precise situation, and it can't be. I'd only say that I think the best things I do are when I don't know what the hell I'm doing, when I'm really lost, and when the work is of such nature that I don't know the answer, and I've got to find it through a very sustained trial and error process. The problem always is with every person, I think, involved in any area of the creative field, is that creativity, the search for creative expression, involves tremendous anxiety. And so the tendency is always to protect oneself by leaning on the past knowledge or the past success. And it can never be. One must always go through the pangs of birth if you want to accept that as a valid idea. That is to say, you have to get lost to get found. And this is the only way I know it. I know it also in that when I look at that art that profoundly moves me, there's a residue. There's something about it that I feel, I'm sure, and remember, I am sure, and becomes kind of a collective mass of criteria that exists there. That is to say, I suppose that art, or at least what I'm making, art comes from art. But it also comes from one's personal need. And apparently what I need is a very stable form and a very controlled form and as selected a form as I can possibly achieve.
And on the way to it, to have the utmost, to be open to many kinds of suggestions, and would you use the term accident? I mean, how would you?
I don't think there's an accident. I think that you have to take many chances in order to make the choices. But I don't think there's such a thing as an accident. I think the conscious artist controls not the accident, but the multiplicity of the choice, and then finally focuses it, as with a laser beam, on one that could not possibly be any other way. I think the problem is that if we know the idea, then we're simply illustrating it, and that's no good. If we have the concept, we perhaps have the center of the wheel from which we can radiate. But it takes energy, and energy of psyche and energy of spirit to be able to radiate from the hub and go out into the wilderness, and then to come back to the hub without getting lost. And this is always the problem, to keep open. I think when one is a very young artist, it's very easy to take wild chances because you really haven't much to lose. That is to say, when you're young, you skirmish with the Indians, you fight with the Apaches one day and with the Sioux the next, and so forth, but you always run back to the fort. But when you know, in a sense, who you are, you know that there's no fort that you can go back to. So you really have to go all the way out and take all the chances there are in order to create your own sense of being, your own awareness.
That's beautifully put, Leo, and almost anything we could add would be anticlimactic. I have a certain curiosity that may seem trifling after what you just said about the way you use these objects in your paintings that usually flat, that seem like found objects, and yet, I don't know, you would have to be the luckiest man in the world to find all those things. And how they enter into this dialectic of adventuring with materials and within a framework.
Well, I have a lot of found objects. Sure, I go to the town dump, or I look at the beaches or the city streets and pick up things. In my studio, if the Board of Health ever gets hold of it, will be shut down, I'm sure. I mean, it's a junk heap. But I make a lot of the stuff myself. I mean, much of the material is muslin, which is dyed with acrylic. And as soon as there's a hole in the bed sheet, I swipe it, and my friends pick up things for me. And I like the idea of cloth, There's something about the way it adheres, the way it feels, the way you rip it, things you can do with it. You know that Leonardo once said that one can see a battle in a stain on a wall. And so the subjective element is always there, that if you walk the streets, you see something you like, you pick it up, it's in your pocket. Sometimes you forget it and you're at a social affair and you've got a piece of junk in your pocket, you pull it out. So where the hell did I get that? But you surround yourself with things that are meaningful to you. And sometimes I keep things as long as 3 or 4 years and don't use them, finally throw them away. Sometimes I do use them, sometimes immediately, sometimes much later, you know.
Thank you, Leo. Leo earned a reputation as a leading figure in collage. He began working with collage and assemblage around 1957. Two of his collages actually entered the Museum of Modern Art by 1962. As we have seen, he utilized collage and mixed media materials in his Yantra, Tonka, and Kathmandu series. He enjoyed the collage aesthetic because of its sense of simultaneity, because of the disparate elements often found in a collage. He considered that pieces fit together, as he told Rosemary McLaughlin in the Provincetown Advocate in 1987, they fit together, quote, not necessarily logically, but aesthetically and psychologically, which was interesting, thinking back to the quote that when we just heard him speaking. And then this is his dear friend, Robert Motherwell, really felt very strongly about Leo as a major collage figure. And so you can see, he says, now that the 20th century is approaching its finale, this was written in 1991, it is possible in my mind, and to my mind, plausible to hold that its single greatest invention in art is that of collage. One of collage's masters during the past decade is Leo Manso, whose impeccable sense of placement and musical silence amidst a noisy world calls up the Quattrocento of Manso's beloved Italy, if not its grandeur. Manso's work is small in scale, secular, and intimate in its subjects, but no less implacable in its ethical integrity, its aesthetic of formed sensuousness. Seductively beautiful as the work is at first sight, it holds its own like iron, a visual poetry that never compromises, never loses its inner life. Leo Manso's works have my deep respect, as does the man as an artist. Robert was a wonderful writer, as we can see. Let me see. So I'm showing you next Mostly Red, which is at the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. And here you can really get a very good sense of the tearing of the paper and his use of materials in this collage. It's rather small, 7 by 10, and it's up in the current show. Manso was attracted by what he called the dynamism of a work in the making. And this, again, is the sense of simultaneity he talks about in the process of making collages. We've seen he used materials like cloth and paper, which he often stained with acrylics. And he talks about the many objects he found, the Provincetown dump in city streets, beaches, and so on. But many of the art of his objects were created by him, as he explained to us. And then I have a section here now on his Italian collages. This is encyclical, which is in the exhibition up now. It's a major collage from 1987, 39 by 32, and also in the collection of PAAM. And so I think this is really redolent of Italy here. And part of what he loved, part of what he called his Caravaggio series, because of the reds and the deep blacks. He began his love affair with Italy in 1975, with travels to that country, as well as Sicily and Tunisia. And it marked a fresh and vital direction in his art. I mean, if you think back to the Tantra and the Yantra series and the Kathmandu and so on. In 1979, he was appointed artist in residence, Accademia Americana, was pre-Rome. He explored the Vatican museums, and through his friendship with some of the curators, was given entree to see objects not usually on public display. He also, of course, knowing his love of found objects, loved the Roman flea market, which he said, quote, opens at 6 and shuts down at 1 for pasta. And there he purchased, and he described it. He said he purchased collage materials and articles such as he called vestments of the church and candles stolen in Naples. And you can see here the liturgical vestment that he utilized, and an example of old manuscript that you can see in the background there. And he also collected a lot. Well, he collected a lot of old books and parchment too. He returned to Rome in 1981 on a Guggenheim Fellowship that was devoted to printmaking and collage. And at that time, traveled widely in Italy and also Sicily. Between 1982 and 1987, he created a series of collages, prints, and assemblages based on Italian influence, which all share a sense of dynamism and movement through his use and placement of color and form. He was drawn to use deep blacks and reds, which I've talked about. He talked about his Caravaggio, a nod to Caravaggio. We can see that in this collage, as well as the collage Erie that we just looked at. He said that in his Roman collages, he was trying to create a sense of what he called vibratory visual sensation, and also a sense of mystery. This is we're looking at Testament now. That's in the show, and here you can definitely see some of the objects that he's collected from flea markets in Italy, and it's from 1976 and other places, because friends would acquire things for him as well. I think we can see his use of well, he enjoyed, as he said, Muslim cloth, bits of string, fragments of old leather, and parchment. This happens to be one of my favorites that he did. It's in the show. This is Trastevere, also in the PAAM exhibition. There's no date on this. But it obviously is coming from his time in Rome. And I can say this because the American Academy is about a 20-minute walk from Trastevere, which is an old part of Rome. And during the period that Leo was staying in the Academy, he would have been able to have gotten wonderful, inexpensive meals. And I'm sure spent a lot of time in Trastevere. So his in this piece, as in many others, there's a sense of the objects, of the oldness of the objects, of aged, discarded materials stripped from their original context and use, and given a new aesthetic and meaning, enhanced by his use of materials, color, and texture. There are few figurative elements in his work. There are some, but they're infrequent. Although in abstract art, there's still references to ideas, things, and places, as we can see here in his nod to Trastevere. And I just wanted to compare. There are, I think, 2 or 3 abstract paintings in the PAAM exhibition, including this wonderful acrylic over here to the left. It's untitled, 52 by 38 inches. And also in the exhibition, the collage on the right called Capriccio from 1978, which is considerably smaller. But if we look at Capriccio, we see his interest in the string. We see his use of color. Sometimes he would talk about he was going to put a kicker in a work, meaning a little bit of color or something that would just be kind of shocking, a visual shock to the visual sensibilities. And so, but if we certainly get caught up in the use of materials in looking at the Capriccio. In the abstract work, the acrylic, which is of course very flat, you see no really text. You don't really see the textures at all that you would notice with a collage, but you can still see that the collage aesthetic has carried over at this period into a lot of his paintings. And I wanted to give you an example of some of the prints that he did, because when he spent that in 1981 in Rome, He did quite a lot of prints. He became really fascinated by them. Many of them were, like the piece on the left, Images of Italy and Sicily, is an offset lithograph from one of his collages. And on the one on the right, Variazione Romani from 1982, which is in, well, both of these in the collection of PAAM. He's not only using a color lithograph, but he's embossing that with collage. And the collage piece, I'm pretty certain it's the blue form over there to the bottom right. So you can see with the prints too, very much a collage aesthetic, very influential. And I'm showing you now a picture of the Provincetown Workshop, which would become Long Point Gallery in 1976. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Provincetown Workshop, and then we have about a 2-minute excerpt of Leo speaking about it too. It was established in 1958 by Leo and his friend Victor Candel. And just mentioning, many of us know how important Provincetown was as an art colony, famous for its art schools, like the Cape Cod School of Art and Charles W. Hawthorne in 1899. In the 1950s, when Leo established the Provincetown Workshop with Candel, there were very popular art schools in town, organized by such artists as Henry Henche, who was a student of Hawthorne's. He ran the school in 1932 to 1984. And of course, Hans Hofmann, the abstract expressionist, his school existed 1935 to 1958. Now, Leo became a well-known teacher, not only in Provincetown, but he was a faculty member of Cooper Union beginning in 1947. So he came to Provincetown, started his school with some experience. He was affiliated with New York University, Columbia University, the Art Students League, and he did a lot of visiting artists sojourns, such as at Dartmouth. Now, what's important about the Provincetown Workshop is that they offered a number of tuition-free scholarships to students, many of whom came from prominent art schools and colleges throughout the country. So we're talking Antioch, the Art Students League, Brown, Cooper Union, Columbia, Cranbrook, New York University, Yale, and many more. There were exchange scholarships offered to additional art schools, along with Fulbright fellowships, among other fellowships. For instance, Leo was able to secure a Fulbright for one of his students who was an art student, I'm forgetting which college, to work with Mark Rothko during the last year of that artist's life. The workshop offered what was called a pool work part of the program, so that it was open 7 days a week until midnight. And so students who needed to bring in extra money could work as carpenters or babysitters and waitresses, waiters, and so on. It can be stated that the Provincetown Workshop was responsible for bringing very gifted art students to Provincetown for 20 years. And this predated Fine Arts Work Center by 10 years. Okay, so let's listen to what Leo says now about his school and teaching.
I think one of the privileges of the so-called older generation is to worry about the younger generation. But I don't think it means a damn. I think the younger generation is going to take care of itself.
You feel pretty hopeful about them then, after having run the school since when, 1957?
58, I think we began. We're 7 years old
Yeah.
now. Well, I think that I think art's made by people, and there are always a few who somehow escape the brainwashing because of the force of their own urgency and the power of their own abilities, seek their own levels, and some percentage find it. It's very hard to be an artist. You know, you can force feed, like they force feed geese and things like that, you know. Young art students, but the one who's going to make it is the one who just has got to be an artist. What's that?
You always find that the one that may turn out to be the maverick who's really good is often the one who will go against the teachers, the problems the teacher sets up for him, or in many ways sort of bridle a bit at anything that's handed to it.
Well, that is probably so, because that kind of a student has some kind of powerful inner need, and therefore he's far less amenable to the directives from the outside. I think the role of a teacher is not necessarily to show a painting student how to make a painting, but to function in many roles as a source of information, as perhaps a catalyst, as an irritant, as opposition, but as something alive in a relationship. But as I say, the good ones find their own way. I think one of the
Thank you, Leo. Okay, this is the photograph that was on the cover of Provincetown Arts magazine in 1991. It's a Joel Meyerowitz photo from 1990. We've seen Leo's significance in terms of the cooperative gallery development in Provincetown, like Gallery 256, which he founded on Commercial Street in 1951. It was the earliest artist cooperative during that period, with exhibitions and lectures. Its members included Will Barnett, Bodkin, Byron Brown, Peter Busa, Campbell, Candell, and Daphnis. It was the center of the modernist artists who were seeking an alternative to the more conservative jury system of the Provincetown Art Association Museum. And he talked about the feeling in terms of cooperative galleries to Chris Busa and Ray Ellman in 1986 with Provincetown Arts, their second publication. He said, the artist cooperative puts the artist's fate in his own hands, not in the hands of a dealer. The motivation is to show the work in an atmosphere created by your fellow artists, where their response can be meaningful to you. You know all the members. In commercial galleries, you don't know the other members. You may or may not like the work, and there is no feedback. Leo was the seminal figure in the development of Long Point in 1976. I've mentioned that, well, what had happened is that the enrollment of his school had gone down. He attributed this to the rising rents. Also, his partner, Victor Candell, died, and his gallery, the Terza Carlos, had closed. So he decided that, that he wanted to open another cooperative gallery. And so he approached some of his friends, initially Fritz Boltman, Bud Hopkins, and Tony Vevers, who recommended other potential artists. These included Varejean Bogosian, we're looking at them here, Carmen Cicero, City of Romboludi, Edward Joby, Rick Klauber, Robert Motherwell, Paul Resica, Judith Rothschild, Sidney Simon, and Nora Spire. Let's see. One of the things I remember working in the gallery is that he would not have the floors sanded because the painting stains left by all the art students over the years were sacrosanct. So he wasn't interested in any elegant gallery at all. At the end of his life, he told a reporter that he considered founding Gallery 256 in Long Point next to teaching as the best things he'd ever done. And he explained to Cindy Nickerson from the Cape Cod Times in 1991. This is about Long Point. He said, we're all quite secure and we all have relative reputation, so there's far less competition. Then two, I don't think we have the kinds of illusions that younger artists have about fame, fortune, whatever. We conceive this not as a commercial enterprise, but as a group of friends who spend their work off against their peers. A commercial gallery insists you make saleable items. We don't give a damn. We do what we think is artistically right. What I'm going to show you now is this video clip that I had said I would show. And it was, as I said, it was on the the publication party in July 1991, held at Long Point Gallery. And you see Leo over here. And he's standing in front of a yellow painting, and you'll notice it's very different than the works that we were looking at in the PAAM exhibition, which were mostly collages. And I remember he was very excited about this painting. He felt it was a breakthrough. He hadn't been painting in a while. And so this to him, it was a major painting, and he was very happy to have it hanging. And you'll see him talking about his work here in a minute at the exhibition. So one of the things before I start this, though, you will see some photographs of famous people that many of us know from Provincetown history. And those were photographs that were taken by Renata Ponsold, and they were in the exhibition that was up during the Provincetown Arts Publication Party. So, and you'll also notice some of that, while Leo's talking, there's quite a lot of background noise, but there was really nothing we could do about that. But here goes. You'll see a little bit. I thought you'd like to see what Long Point looked like at this point.
yellow is symbolic of something. I don't quite know what it is. I don't quite know until I find it. Now this is really, for me, a painting of luminosity, light. Light is not a tangible thing. It's a sensation or a feeling or an experience. I'm more interested in the transcendental than in the actual. So I strive to externalize feelings that I don't even know about until I find them in the process of painting. It sounds like a lot of nonsense. That's the way it is. I think art has to inform and not describe. I think it should bring the spectator, or rather the participator, into a new realm. Not everybody is capable of participating. Only those who have the sensibility, the experience, and the intelligence are capable of experiencing the work. The further the work gets from the appearance of things, the smaller the group of people who would respond to it. As Stendhal said, Stendhal wrote in 1827, he said, in 1927, perhaps they will understand me. There are 5 million Frenchmen alive now, of which 50,000 perhaps have been educated, of which 5,000 only understand me now. Perhaps in 100 years there will be more. I think that's the fate of any artist. The artist is either a saint or a prophet. The saint does the correct thing. The prophet even sings a song in the wilderness because he must sing the song. Now, relevant to this painting is not a picture of anything. It's a painting of vibration, color sensation, certain kind of space, and something to contemplate. If you ride past it in the subway, you'll never see it. It's time in this world to pause, speculate, wait, and wait for the message. If it's there, you'll get it. If it's not there, you won't.
Okay, I'm just, we've run out of time, so I'm going to just show you some, I don't know, about 3 more photographs. This is Renata Ponsoldt Motherwell, Leo at a hanging, was a hanging actually at Long Point Gallery in the late 80s, Leo and Carmen Cicero at the Long Point, Leo and Robert Motherwell at the Long Point. And then he wrote, basically, I think he summarized a lot for us in terms of what his work, how he conceived of his work. And he talked about the landscape, the distillation of landscape. And he talks about a symbolic concretation of philosophic values, which is the other theme that comes to him as polarities. So I think at this point, I should turn this back to Leslie. And thank you all very much. I hope you've enjoyed Leo. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much, Mary.
That's okay.
That was great. And you taught us so much about the longevity of his career and the different styles that he worked in. Would you like to say anything about the exhibition at PAAM and how it feels to be walking through this space and being surrounded by his work again? Does it bring back any memories for you?
Well, it reminds me that a lot of the pieces that we showed at Long Point were from the Italian series. I mean, there were very relatively a few examples that I can remember seeing of the Kathmandu or the Yantra, series, or the Tantric series. But I was just struck by really what a remarkable artist he is. The unexpectedness of how original his pieces are, his sense of materials, and the kickers that he always liked to put in a lot of his work. But I just had renewed really enthusiasm and passion for his work when I saw that, when I saw the exhibition again, which I've seen several times.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for doing the work of getting the audio and visual clips, because I think it really does bring so much to your presentation to be able to hear him and to be able to speak so eloquently about his work.
Well, it's really delightful as an art historian to be able to actually speak and research someone that you knew, because so often we're always researching and artists that are gone. So it was a tremendous thrill for me, really, to hear his voice, as I say, and to look. I was struck, really, but there was a lot I didn't know in terms of the richness of his past and a lot of the philosophic values and that he brought to his work, because I knew him later in his life, So the interviews are very instructive for me in terms of looking at earlier work, but you can see those themes running into his later work as well.
Do you find that there are any challenges with this kind of research when you knew someone so well?
I just enjoyed it so immensely because I had such a warm regard for Leo, and my husband as well. He was just a remarkable person, and very knowledgeable and cared very deeply about things. So I just enjoyed it. It was just like a pleasure after so many of the, as I say, so many of my other artists have been gone. So I loved it.
Good. Well, thank you again so much. As I said, this is our last Fredi Schiff Levin lecture series of the season, so we will see everyone next year. Thank you so much, Mary. Please come to see the show. It ends October 17th, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.